what you're really looking for is a quick way to make a dirty decision.
And the other thing is, we really have to keep in mind that people who hold power want to maintain power. And they are not going to do anything. You see, one of the reasons that the whole argument about affirmative action is such a necessary argument is that this society has demonstrated itself to not have a moral conscience. It doesn't do what's right. Neither does it even do what's correct. And therefore, if you don't enforce some kind of correct behavior, this society will not act correctly. And the behavior of whites, European Americans towards African Americans throughout our history here has been incorrect, immoral, and wrong.
So morality cannot be legislated, but behavior
correct action
can be regulated.
You can make them act right. And that's the kind of thing. So my point is that very often we get into kind of debates and dialogues arguing as if it's a logical process. It is not logical. It was not intended to be logical. And the objective is to maintain brute power and control over limited resources that they want to maintain for themselves. Other people want to maintain for themselves.
Okay, you mentioned brute power, limited control in educational institutions, which makes my mind focus on the prison system, where almost 1 million black men languish across this nation. People say, well, if they hadn't done crime, they shouldn't have to worry about doing the time. How do you respond to why there are so many black men in prison, Dr. Akbar?
Well, again, it continues exactly what I said. I think it's a definition of power. And certainly if you can begin to corral the manpower of a community, you can certainly keep them out of the competition for genuine power. You know, therefore, one of the things I think that is probably one of the most dangerous ideas going on in the nation today is the proposal by the Black Leadership Summit of Ben Shavis and Minister Farrakhan of 1 million black men marching on Washington.
Do you think that's a dangerous idea?
It's dangerous for white America. It's dangerous for them, you see, because it is black men defining an agenda for themselves which precludes them having the kind of influence that the prison gives them optimally, you see. Now, my point is that the prison system minimizes the ability for self-determination. And it is clearly a system that does nothing corrective. No one has been able to demonstrate that prisons reduce crime. No one has been able to demonstrate that the men who go to prison come out more able to serve and operate in the community. In fact, just the opposite is more typically demonstrated. But again, that's why I say the only reason that people would make those kinds of illogical decisions is because that's not the question. The question is not who is doing wrong. The question is how can we control certain segments of the population. Who do you want to control? Look at the population statistics in the prison and you'll find out who wants to control. Who does the controlling? Look at the people who are making the decisions about building more prisons. And who works there? Who makes the money from it? Who does the research? And who therefore gets the returns and rewards from that? And then you know who has the power and what is the purpose for having that
Prisons
power.
and building them are a growth industry
It's a growth
across
industry.
the United States.
Yeah.
Running them as well.
Let me give a concrete example of what Dr. Akbar is talking about. I just saw numbers on imprisonment for crack, cocaine. Now, everybody knows there's a difference between the powder and the crack.
In punishment of which one you're holding.
But this is crack, and comparing whites who use crack and blacks who use crack. The whites who use crack are almost never tried in federal court.
Because it's a federal offense, the mandatory 5 years?
Because you go to prison more if you're tried in the federal system. I just saw this write-up, and the numbers, the gap was just so startling that it couldn't be anything other than racism in operation. But that's just one example of the inequity in the justice system that results in what is now 7 times higher number of black men in prison than in South Africa. And the prescription that the way to fix the problem in the communities now is to build more prisons. But not only to build more prisons, but if you read the Bell Curve book, they suggest that they've got to put only certain types of people in these prisons, and there's going to be more of them. And then some of the lesser crimes, those people will be incarcerated in camps. And then there'll still be people incarcerated with electronic bracelets in something that they're calling neighborhood arrest. Now so the numbers are going to be astronomical if that public policy recommendation is followed, and apparently it will be, because those men are the ones that hang out with the ultra right-wing conservatives who are making these same kinds of proposals with maybe just a little bit milder language.
So I go back to one of my original questions. We've
Yeah.
gathered all this data. How do we reverse all that is happening to our people with this knowledge?
First of all, let's not minimize the importance of the word. I mean, like, people like to call it rhetoric. People like to say it's just talking. Talking is the foundation for re-education. So this program, this format, having this opportunity is so limited. The amount of talk show hours that occur on television are overwhelming. And the amount of garbage and trash that gets talked is overwhelmingly limited, is overwhelmingly in a higher proportion than the kind of talk like this that goes on. So number one is to get a new kind of information to our people. Let's begin to tell them another story. And the story that we are talking about in terms of self-affirmation is a critical way to begin to counter that, as well as help let our people become more conscious of what happens in warfare and how we are at war and people are fighting to destroy us. We need to teach that so that people will understand that it's not a RoboCop who is our enemy. It is Charles Murray who's writing a book defining us as being intellectually inferior who is our enemy. It's the people who are selecting comedians and buffoons to put on TV rather than selecting our scholars to begin to tell us something about where we can go. I'm sorry,
Dr. Hilliard.
I can't say it any better than that.
Okay. All right, then let me take another tack on this. We always talk about our young people and what's wrong with our young people, but what's wrong with our elders today? It seems to me it's the elders' responsibility to reach back and teach the young people what we already know.
I think elders need socialization just as much as the children do, especially those who missed what they ought to have had. And then I think elders need information. You know, many of our people don't have the kind of information that we're sharing right here, right now. So they have no sense of the depth of the problem, the nature of the siege that Dr. Akbar was talking about. And so if you look at the behavior of people who have means, sometimes degrees, bank accounts, and so forth, you look at their behavior, you would swear that everything is just perfect because their behavior reflects no attention to the crisis that we're in. But given what we just got through talking about, just take the prison thing alone, the socialization of our kids alone, these are critical things, and if we're not mobilized to address those, and we are the only ones that will address those, no one else will come into our communities and fix that problem other than us.
Even though the physical realities of slavery were over 130 years ago, the bottom line is that psychologically, not only do we still suffer from the duress of that condition, we also have behavioral patterns that were established during that time that persist. And as with any other thing whereby we change our behavior, is that it must be preceded by awareness. If we don't know it, we can't change it. Let's decide that we want to stop acting like slaves, and let's understand that when we tear each other down, when we can't come together as a community, when we begin to see work as something that services other people and not ourselves, that's not normal. That's how slaves act. Do you want to be a slave? Well, stay on the plantation. I want to get free.
All right, on that note, we'll close it out. I thank you, gentlemen, both for being here. It's been very enlightening. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And I thank you for being with us also. I'm Chris Moore. Bye.